My parents tried to frame me for smashing my brother's Tesla to pull off insurance fraud, but what they didn't know was I'd been saving evidence for months, and what came next shattered more than just the car. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Growing up, I paid rent to live in the same house while Tristan breezed through with zero responsibilities. They always said he was sensitive, which somehow justified buying him a new Tesla after flunking sophomore year. When I got a scholarship, they told me not to brag. Mom called me too intense for asking why he needed a $70,000 car. They framed entitlement as love and silence as respect. Every family dinner became a shrine to Tristan's minor efforts passing biology, updating his LinkedIn. Meanwhile, I got eye rolls for working 2 jobs. Dad once asked me why I couldn't be more like Tristan after I aced an internship. When I brought home a certificate, it went in a drawer. His parking ticket, they framed it like proof of maturity. I started keeping wins to myself. Less noise, less guilt. Tristan drove recklessly, flooring the Tesla through our quiet neighborhood at midnight. I told Mom it was dangerous. She sighed. He's just blowing off steam. Dad said I was jealous. The night he clipped a parked car, they paid cash to keep it quiet. Chris saw the dent and asked questions. I warned them again. They called it sibling drama. Meanwhile, my insurance got flagged for a claim I didn't make. Tristan bragged to his friends that rules are for the broke. I overheard him saying he raced on the freeway at 120 mph. I brought it up, thinking they'd finally care. Instead, Dad warned me not to stir tension. Mom cooked his favorite meal that night. When I refused to sit with them, she said I was being dramatic. My best friend Chris stopped visiting. He hated the fake family vibe. Tristan showed up drunk one night, stumbling in at 2 a.m. with the Tesla's front bumper hanging off. I asked what happened. He slurred, "Just a tree, chill." My parents rushed him to bed like he was 5. I took photos. Mom deleted them from my phone. "No need for drama," she said. Chris told me to back up everything. That's when I started saving files to my cloud drive. The next week, Dad asked if I could lend Tristan just 10 grand to make things right. I laughed. He didn't. Family supports each other. He barked. I asked, "When have you ever supported me?" He said, "Don't be disrespectful." I walked out. Chris offered his couch. I started packing essentials: passport, laptop, external drive. That night, the Tesla was towed into the garage. "It's just a small repair," Mom claimed. Mac Donovan, an insurance investigator, showed up 2 days later. He asked about the Tesla. Dad interrupted, saying it was a minor scratch. Mac's eyes flicked to the corner of the garage where the bumper sat. I stayed silent. After he left, Mom asked if I'd said anything weird. Tristan said he'd got a big mouth. I started noticing missing emails auto-deleted. I bought a burner phone and backed up everything again. That weekend, I saw Tristan with my old baseball bat in the garage. Cleaning, he shrugged. 2 days later, the Tesla had new dents matching that bat. Then the real bomb dropped: a vandalism claim in my name. Chris was furious. He reminded me I hadn't driven the car in months. I filed a police report. Officer Rivera listened, but her tone said civil issue. Mac called and asked to meet again. I met Mac at a diner across town. He slid over a folder: security footage from a neighbor's ring cam. Tristan, wielding my bat, striking his own car. Date stamped, clear as day. Mac said, "You've got a case, but your family won't like the fallout." I nodded. They already picked their side. He advised legal counsel. I sent Chris copies of everything. That night, I came home to find my room ransacked, laptop gone. I confronted my parents. "Where's my laptop?" I demanded. Mom looked nervous. Dad said, "We needed to check your intentions." I snapped, "You mean delete evidence?" Tristan grinned. "Maybe it fell." I grabbed my backup from Chris S. and left. Oh, goodbyes. They texted that I was tearing the family apart. Chris offered to help with the legal side. I met with Officer Rivera again. This time, I had undeniable proof and fury. Officer Rivera reviewed the footage in silence. "This changes everything," she finally said. A formal investigation opened. Tristan was brought in for questioning. My parents hired a lawyer instantly. Mac gave an affidavit. I watched my family's lies unravel. One file at a time. Tristan posted cryptic stories online calling me a snake. I didn't respond. Chris updated me daily. We waited for charges to formalize. The silence from home was deafening. 2 days later, Tristan tried to flip it, claiming I doctored the footage. Their lawyer argued deepfakes, but Mac had metadata logs. Chris printed timestamps, showing my backup dates. Officer Rivera confirmed chain of custody. Mom still whispered, "This can't be happening." Dad paced the hall like a caged animal. I sat through the hearing, jaw tight, hands steady. For once, they weren't in control. The judge approved formal charges for insurance fraud. Gloria broke down outside the courthouse, sobbing loud enough for cameras. "He's just a boy," she wailed. Paul stared ahead like stone. Tristan looked confused, like he thought charm could fix this. I didn't stop walking. Chris and I drove back in silence. At home, I opened the last drawer, Mom's scrapbook. Every page praised Tristan. I added a copy of the police report to the final slot, then closed it for good. The news ran it under suburban fraud scheme involving Tesla. No names yet, but neighbors knew. Ms. Daly stopped me, eyes wide. We always wondered about that car. Dad sent a long email, blame. Disappointment, confusion. Mom tried calling. I blocked both. Chris helped me set up a PO box. I moved into a small studio across town. Quiet, clean, just mine. I framed the ring footage not out of spite, but proof I saw everything. Weeks later, the trial date was set. Chris came with me to every prep meeting. Max said, "You're holding up well." I wasn't. Nightmares came, but I hid them. I wore suits, took notes, practiced answers. They'd tried to bury me in guilt. But now I held the facts. When the prosecutor asked if I wanted to testify, I said yes loud and clear. Chris squeezed my hand. A time to end this. Tristan's lawyer offered a plea deal, 6 months in county jail, no felony. Mom begged me to reject it. "You're ruining his future," she said. I stared at her. "He tried to ruin my present." "The doll left it up to me," Chris said. 6 months is still accountability. I agreed. The court accepted. When the cuffs clicked on, Tristan locked eyes with me. Not hate, not regret, just disbelief, like I'd finally mattered. After sentencing, Dad sent me a 2-line email. "We hope someday you'll forgive us." "Family's complicated." I didn't reply. Gloria posted old baby photos of Tristan with sappy captions. Comments were disabled. Chris threw a small celebration just us and takeout. He handed me a box, inside a new bat, engraved with my name. "Next time, just hit balls." We laughed that night. I slept soundly for the first time in years. A week into Tristan's sentence, I got a letter handwritten, shaky. "I'm sorry, I messed up. They made me believe you were the problem." I stared at the page, unsure if it was remorse or manipulation. Chris warned, "He's testing your boundary." I scanned it, found no admission of guilt, just guilt trip phrasing. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter, not for meaning, just as evidence. Of what? That even guilt has a script. Gloria dropped by my apartment building unannounced. She stood outside, tears streaked, holding a lasagna. "Just wanted to talk." I watched from the window, unmoved. Chris said, "This is bait." I nodded. She stayed an hour, then left it on the steps. I threw it away. Later she emailed, furious I rejected her love. She posted online about ungrateful children. Her version starred herself as victim, but people had started asking questions and noticing inconsistencies. Paul emailed a def-titled timeline of events, his own version. It painted Tristan as manipulated and me as emotionally unstable. Chris read it aloud, each sentence more absurd than the last. "They're rewriting history," he muttered. I replied, "Once I have recordings, withdraw this or I go public." Silence followed. Days later, Paul deleted the LinkedIn post about his family's tragedy. Maybe it clicked. I wasn't the kid they could silence anymore. An anonymous Reddit post surfaced under our legal advice. "Brother framed me for car vandalism. Parents complicit. Now they want money." The details were mine almost word for word. Chris confirmed the IP trace to my old neighborhood. "They're fishing for sympathy," he said. I replied anonymously, linking the court case. The post vanished within hours, but screenshots remained. A few users messaged me privately, said they'd lived similar nightmares. I wasn't alone, not anymore. Chris and I hosted a quiet dinner, just close friends. Midway through, a door knock. Officer Rivera stood there. "Not in uniform, just here as a courtesy," she said. Gloria filed a restraining order against me, claimed I threatened her online. Chris burst out laughing. "She's the one camping your doorstep," Rivera sighed. "I'll write it up as retaliatory, but keep records." That night, I documented everything from messages to mail. Drama digitized. The local news updated the headline, "Fraud case, parental involvement alleged." No names again, but neighbors connected dots. Someone slipped a printout under my door with "Truth Wins" scribbled on it. I smiled at the grocery store. A cashier whispered, "Good for you." Chris noticed fewer cold stares. At last, silence wasn't complicity, it was respect. Gloria unfriended me on every platform. Paul deleted his Twitter. Tristan, still jail-bound, still sulking. Tristan's ex, Maddie, messaged me. "I always thought something was off," she wrote. Attached screenshots of Tristan boasting he could wreck the car and walk away clean. Dated months before the incident. Chris advised caution. Maddie once sided with them, still. I sent the evidence to Mac. He added it to the case file. I blocked Maddie. Some people don't switch sides, they just crave center stage. Not mine to give anymore. The day before Tristan's release, a letter arrived, from Paul. Not handwritten, typed, cold. "We hope you've learned boundaries. Family matters should stay private." Chris shredded it. "That's not an olive branch, it's a leash." I didn't argue. That night, I journaled everything, dates, names, quotes. I labeled it "When They Lost Me." Not a burn book, a survival file. Facts don't fade, even when liars yell louder. I locked it in my safe. Tristan came home. First day out, he posted a gym selfie with the caption "back and better." Comments were limited. Chris laughed. Dude thinks it's spring break. That night, Gloria posted a family photo cropped. I wasn't in it, but neighbors saw. One replied, "Where's your eldest?" The comment vanished. The cracks were public now. At brunch, someone tapped my shoulder. "You're Noah, right? Good job standing up." My hands didn't shake anymore. Chris found a subreddit thread dissecting Tristan's case. It had gone semi-viral. Golden child fraud saga. Users linked public records, debated parental guilt. One comment hit hard. "No, it's the real adult here." I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Truth travels, even without a bullhorn. Gloria posted a quote, "Family is forever." Someone replied, "So is court documentation." Chris saved that when we laughed. The internet doesn't forget, and neither did I. An anonymous email hit my inbox. "We want to interview you." Red Flag Radio podcast. Chris raised an eyebrow. Could be cathartic, or chaos. I agreed. Under alias, the episode dropped. The scapegoat son. Thousands listened, comments poured in. Sounds like my mom's Sim story. Different house. For once, I wasn't shouting into a void. I muted my name for peace, but bookmarked the feedback. Pain echoed, but so did validation. My voice mattered. A Tristan DM'd me from a burner account. "Hope you're happy. You ruined everything." I didn't reply. He followed up, "Bet you still think you're the victim." Chris said, "Block it. Don't dance with ghosts." I did, but not before screenshotting it. More evidence of the cycle. Gloria emailed later, asking if we could talk civilly. I sent her the same screenshot. No caption, no reply. Silence finally felt like strength, not surrender. A lawyer friend of Chris offered a free consult. "Defamation case is possible," she said. Gloria's posts, Paul's emails, they weren't harmless. I waited. Chris said, "This time, you set the terms." I chose not to sue. Instead, I drafted a cease and desist. Clean, formal, cold. When it arrived, Gloria deleted her entire Facebook. Paul switched to private. "Sometimes victory isn't noise, it's making your boundary so clear. No one dares cross it." A high school teacher messaged me, "I remember you always quiet, always kind. Sorry for what your family put you through." I cried in my car, quietly, not because it hurt but because someone saw me back then. Now Chris bought us celebratory donuts. "You good?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. I saved the message, proof that who I was before the chaos still mattered, that I'd been real the whole time. Chris encouraged me to submit an essay to a local magazine. Topic: escaping family roles. I hesitated. Publishing meant exposure, but also release. I sent it under a pen name. 2 weeks later it ran. The editor emailed, praising its clarity. "You've given others language for pain." I didn't share it with Gloria or Paul. Didn't need to. The truth was out, and it didn't need their approval to be valid. At the library, I spotted a flyer for a support group, Adult Survivors of Family Narcissism. I went, sat in the back, said nothing the first time, but I returned. The third meeting I shared a piece, just a sentence. "They lied to protect a lie." Nods followed. Eyes welled up. I wasn't just healing, I was seen. Later, someone slipped me a note, "Thanks for going first." It lived in my wallet now. One evening, Chris showed me a meme, "Golden child ruins everything. Scapegoat gets therapy." I laughed loud. "Real." We framed it in the kitchen. Sometimes, humor feels like closure. Gloria texted again, "Holidays coming, let's talk." I didn't answer. Instead, I scheduled a solo trip, mountains, books, silence. On that trip, I wrote a list, things I owe no one. At the top, an explanation for surviving. It was only one word: none. At therapy, I finally said it. I wasn't the broken one. My voice cracked. My therapist smiled. "You weren't, you were just blamed." I let that sit. No rebuttal, no deflection, just air. Later, I posted one sentence on a locked journal blog. It wasn't me. The response: hearts, claps, solidarity. Chris said, "Told you I still kept boundaries." But now I didn't feel guilty for enforcing them. Healing isn't loud, it's certain. I was invited to speak at a college panel on navigating toxic family systems. Chris cheered. Full circle moment. I wore a blazer, shook hands, shared my story, brief, clear, strong. A student asked, "How do you forgive?" I replied, "You don't owe forgiveness, you owe yourself peace." Applause followed. Later, I got an email, "Thank you. You gave words to what I lived." This time, the echo wasn't pain, it was power. Chris and I launched a blog, Unwritten Sons, anonymous submissions, raw stories. Within weeks, it hit 1,000 followers. People craved release, not revenge. Truth, not tantrums. Gloria unsubscribed from my email list. Paul never mentioned it. Tristan is still posting selfies, but the blog lived. I answered one submission every week. Signed them in. No dramatics, just acknowledgement. For the kids who got blamed for speaking up, I wanted them to know they weren't alone. Chris suggested we host a virtual meetup. "Let people speak," he said. We scheduled it. 10 showed up, then 30. Stories poured out: estrangement, gaslighting, quiet resilience. I listened more than I spoke. When it ended, Someone said, I didn't cry until you nodded. That stuck. The smallest validation becomes a flood when you've lived dry. Tristan posted a TikTok dance. Comments were brutal. I didn't gloat. I just closed my laptop and made tea. I found my old yearbook while cleaning, beside Tristan's photo. Golden boy. No quote. I remembered skipping it, too exhausted to pretend. Chris snapped a pic. Captioned it, look who grew up to break the curse. We laughed, but something healed too. The silence back then wasn't weakness, it was survival. I ordered a new frame. Put my senior photo beside the court transcript. Memory and truth side by side, finally equal. A message came from Paul's sister, my aunt. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. She attached a photo me at age 6, holding a toy bat. You always stood your ground. I blinked hard. She wasn't part of the drama, but her silence had stung. Chris whispered. Some people take longer to choose truth. I replied, thanks, that means more than you know. Maybe not every bridge burned. Some just smoldered. One submission to the blog hit hard. A woman wrote, they made me the villain, then begged me to save them. Chris and I sat in silence. I emailed her back, anonymously, you are not a villain for surviving. She replied, I read your post last month. It kept me from going back. That night, I lit a candle not for grief, but gratitude, pain, recycled into safety. That was the real twist. Tristan tried launching a YouTube channel. Redemption Drave first video him shirtless, talking about haters. Comments were brutal. View count flatlined. He deleted it within a week. Gloria posted cryptic Bible quotes. Hall shared leadership articles. But none addressed the truth. I stopped checking. Not out of indifference, out of freedom. My life didn't orbit theirs anymore. Chris brought home a cake. It read, your orbit, your rules. I carved the first slice. An email from the high school principal arrived. We're launching an alumni mentorship program. Would you speak? I hesitated. That building held echoes. Chris said, take the mic. I accepted. Standing on that stage, I shared the truth, not scandal, but survival. Students nodded. A teacher hugged me. You're not the same kid. She was wrong. I was the same, just no longer pretending. Growth isn't becoming someone else, it's finally being who you were. A childhood friend messaged me, didn't know all that went down. You always seemed okay. I replied, I tried to be. They apologized for not asking more. I didn't hold it against them back then. I was good at hiding, now I wasn't. We met for coffee, laughed over old jokes. It didn't erase the past, but it filled a page I'd left blank. Some recollections aren't repair, they're rediscovery. And that counts too. One morning, I got a call from Mac. You good? He asked, just checking in. I smiled, yeah, I am. He paused, glad to hear it. You stayed solid. We chatted briefly. Before hanging up, he said, you did what most can't, stood alone and stood tall. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened. Validation from those who see behind the scenes hits different. He wasn't family, but he showed up when they didn't. Gloria tried again, sent a birthday card. Inside a check for $200. No message. Chris raised an eyebrow. Is this an apology or hush money? I didn't cash it. Didn't shred it either. Just stored it. Not out of hope but record. The envelope joined the rest in my safe, not as trophies, as testimony. Love given like currency is not love, it's leverage. And I wasn't for sale anymore. Paul left a voicemail, your cousin's wedding is next month. We'd like you there. No apology, no acknowledgement, just assumption. I didn't call back. Instead, I served decline with a note, I wish the couple well. Chris said, that's classier than they deserve. I wasn't aiming for revenge, just peace, the kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase. That weekend, I booked a solo spa retreat, no speeches, just silence, and it felt earned. The blog gained traction. A publisher emailed, ever considered turning your story into a book? I froze. Chris said, that's the next step. I wasn't sure. Publishing meant reliving but also reclaiming. I replied, maybe, let me think. That night, I reread my posts. They weren't just venting, they were roadmaps. Survivors need those. I opened a new doc. Titled Chapter 1, the car was never the problem. The first line wrote itself. Chris surprised me with a framed quote, some truths don't scream, they just stay true. I hung it above my desk. The blog's inbox flooded weekly. Survivors, siblings, partners, strangers. Their words echoed mine. Each reply I sent felt like planting something. Not rage resilience, not blame clarity. I didn't want to be famous, I wanted to be useful. When people said, your story helped, I didn't deflect. I said, thank you, you helped too. One follower sent me a painting, me, faceless, holding a bat like a torch. You lit the way. The note read. I stared at it for an hour. Chris framed it. Iconic, he said. I wasn't sure it fit my wall, but it fit my story. I emailed the artist, you made me braver. They replied, you were already brave. You just got loud. I hung it next to the transcript. Past and present. Tristan tagged me in an old family photo captioned, we all make mistakes. I untaged, blocked, moved on. Chris muttered, sheep shot. I agreed. He wasn't apologizing, he was laundering image. I didn't reply. I didn't post back. Growth isn't reactive, it's selective. That night, I revisited my things I owe no one list, added a new line acknowledgement of bad faith piece. Closure isn't what they give, it's what you stop waiting for. A journalist reached out, would you speak on record for a feature on family manipulation? Chris said, your story matters, but only if it's on your terms. I agreed, pseudonym only. The article ran. Quotes, facts, redacted names. Response was overwhelming. One reader wrote, you made me feel less crazy. I forwarded it to Chris. This is why, I said. Not revenge, not spectacle, just resonance. Truth as compass. No spotlight needed. The support group asked me to lead a session. I hesitated, then said yes. That night, I stood before 10 strangers. Hi, I'm Noah. I began. They lied. I left, and I'm still here. Nods, tears, laughter. Afterward, someone whispered, that was the bravest thing I've heard. I shook my head. Showing up is the brave part. We all had scars, but tonight, we also had language, and that was more than survival. That was voice. I bumped into Miss Daly outside the bookstore. She smiled. Your parents stopped coming to HOA meetings. I shrugged. I don't track them anymore. She leaned in. People talk, but most just respect you now. I didn't expect that. Not pity, respect. I thanked her, bought 2 books. One was on boundaries, the other blank journal. Chris teased. New chapter, I nodded. Not just new, mine twist wasn't betrayal, it was reclaiming authorship. Chris and I rewatched old home videos. One showed me at 10 building a cardboard lie detector. Gloria laughed off my questions. Paul said, you ask too much. Tristan hogged the camera. I watched my young self. Ernest ignored. Chris paused it. He deserved better. I agreed, then rewound, not to forget but to witness. That boy grew up to catch lies for real, and he never stopped asking, just started demanding answers with evidence. A reader sent me a tiny sculpture Tesla, split down the middle, with a bat embedded, captioned evidence over ego. I laughed hard. Chris gave it prime shelf space. Gloria wouldn't have called it petty. Paul, disrespectful. At Tristan, who knows? But to me, it was perfect. Not vengeance, just proof. Symbol turned souvenir. We don't always get justice in court. Sometimes we get it in clay. Community and clarity. I looked at it and smiled. On the anniversary of the crash, I took a drive, not in a Tesla, in my own beat-up Honda. No luxury, no symbolism, just freedom. I parked near the tree Tristan hit, walked past, didn't pause, didn't film, just moved. That's the real ending, not revenge, not applause, motion, away from what broke me, toward what didn't. Chris called dinner. I smiled. Yeah, but I'm driving. This time, the wheel and the story were mine. I stood in my apartment one night holding the sculpture. The framed transcript, the bat. Artifacts of survival. Not trophies, truths. I whispered, I made it. No applause, just breath. Chris walked in, nodded, looks good in here. He meant more than furniture. Healing isn't dramatic, it's daily. I brewed tea, wrote in my journal, I am not what they said I was. And for the first time, I believed it without flinching. Chris and I reorganized the apartment. In one box, letters I never sent, screenshots I no longer needed. You sure? He asked. I nodded. I saved them for protection. I don't need that armor now. We burned them in a fire pit quietly. No cheers, no curses, just smoke. Memory turning into ash. Not identity. Afterward, I wrote one word in my journal, unburdened. Letting go didn't mean it didn't happen, it meant it ended. At therapy, I talked about joy, not pain. I feel light, I said. My therapist smiled. That's called regulation. I laughed. New territory, she replied, and you earned every inch. I left with no tasks, no goals, just air. At home, I danced while making dinner badly, freely. Chris walked in, grinned. Who are you? I spun once, apparently someone who's healing. The music wasn't loud, but I was present, and that felt revolutionary. I started saying no without explanation. To calls, to reunions, to guilt. Chris noticed. You're not defensive anymore. I nodded. I'm not scared they'll twist it. Boundaries used to feel like barricades. Now they're scaffolding holding me up. One aunt messaged, we miss you. I replied, I miss peace more. No reply, but also, no collapse. That's progress. I wasn't waiting to be understood, I was just living, and for the first time that was enough. Chris and I went hiking, no phones. No headlines, just trees and silence. I paused on a ridge. This is what freedom feels like, I said. He nodded. No noise, no narratives. We sat in the dirt, sweating, laughing. No symbols, no trauma metaphors, just breath. I used to think healing had to be loud or profound. But here it was dirt under fingernails, a sunburn, a smile that didn't ache, quiet, stubborn peace. One afternoon, I walked past our old house, no detour, no dread. It looked smaller, not haunted, just a building. I didn't stop, didn't stare, just kept walking. Chris asked later, how did it feel? I said, neutral finally. That house held ghosts, sure, but none I still fed. I wasn't stuck in its halls. I lived elsewhere now, in light, in choice. Closure didn't slam doors, it opened new ones, and let old ones stay shut. I printed my blog posts hundreds of pages, bound them myself. No ISBN, just permanence. Chris flipped through it. You turn pain into proof, I nodded. Into process. That binder wasn't for sale, that was for me. A timeline of when I stopped whispering, when I turned survival into structure. I shelved it next to fiction, because this chapter, this life, it was real. And I finally liked the narrator. Not perfect, just honest. I hosted my first solo dinner, no occasion, just because, candlelight music, plates for two, Chris toasted, to peace earned. Not given, I smiled. That table used to be a battlefield. Now it held laughter. No side eyes, no scripts, just stories. We didn't mention Tristan or Gloria or Court. We didn't have to. Their names weren't banned, just irrelevant. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing what got airtime. That night, Joy got the mic. Chris asked me, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? I thought, then wrote it down. It's not your job to fix what broke them. That page went on the fridge, next to receipts. Grocery lists, life's ordinary things, because that's where healing belongs, not just in dramatic breakthroughs, but next to milk and magnets. That note wasn't for nostalgia. It was a reminder I didn't break, I built. One night, I dreamed I was in the old garage. The Tesla gone, the bat clean. Gloria handed me keys. I said, I walk now. Woke up calm. Chris stirred a bad dream. I shook my head. I think it was a goodbye. I journaled it. They offered old tools. I chose new paths. Closure isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's just refusing the ride. That morning, I laced up my sneakers and walked to work free. The county posted an update. Tristan's probation ended. No headlines, no fanfare, just a footnote. Chris forwarded it. I replied with a thumbs up. No rage, no reaction. That part of the story was over. Gloria hadn't reached out in months, Paul either, and I didn't chase it. Not out of bitterness, out of balance. Peace isn't loud, that just stays. That day, I bought new shoes, not for running from anything, but just walking. Chris framed a final photo, me holding the sculpture. Smiling, not forced, not for show, just content. We hung it beside the quote wall. Guests noticed, asked. We told the story without venom, just history, I'd say. Truth no longer hurt to say aloud. That's how I knew I'd healed. Not when they lost, but when I stopped needing them to lose. Their silence used to scream. Now it was just quiet. And I liked it. I volunteered to speak at a community event themed Truth After Trauma. Room of strangers. Microphone. No script. I told the Tesla story start to finish. Gasps, tears, applause. Not for tragedy, for transparency. After, a young man approached me. I thought I was crazy. You made me feel sane. That hit deeper than any verdict. We took a photo. He smiled. Thanks for surviving. Loud. I said, thanks for listening. Full circle, no guilt, no ghost. A nonprofit asked to reprint my blog posts in a survivor resource guide. I agreed. No edits, no euphemisms, just truth. Chris said, from scapegoat to source. I didn't flinch. That phrase used to sting. Now it was fuel. The guide went live. Downloads surged. I received emails, not pity, but thanks. You put words to my wounds. I wasn't just a story, I was support. That's legacy, not what you survive, but what you give others. 1 year to the day, I threw a party not for the crash, but for clarity. Close friends, string lights, music, laughter, no drama, just presence. Chris gave a toast to Noah, who showed us that survival isn't the end, it's the start. I hugged him hard, then danced badly. Freely people snapped photos. Later, I made an album, year 1 free. Every smile in it was earned, not performance, not protection, just joy, unedited. I published my book, not bestseller, not viral, but real, printed. Own. Chris held the first copy like a newborn. You did it, I nodded. No tears, just pride, quiet and firm. The last page read, some truths take a bat to the lies, some just stand. I mailed a copy to Mac, another to Officer Rivera, a third stayed on my shelf. I wasn't waiting for their approval, this story already mattered. Chris and I adopted a dog, Mutt. Scrappy, loud. Named him Echo, because he only repeats joy, I said. Echo tore through the apartment with chaotic grace. No trauma, no legacy, just now. Training him felt like therapy. Consistent, gentle, present. Sometimes healing shows up on 4 paws. One night, he curled beside me. Chris said, he trusts you. I replied, because I trust myself now. That was new, that was everything. Echo snored approval. One evening, I reread that first journal entry. They'll never believe me. I crossed it out, wrote, I believe me, then underlined it. Chris peeked in. Rewriting history, I smiled. Rewriting mine. That sentence wasn't loud, but it landed. I didn't need validation to exist, or to be real. I was done begging for witness. Now, I documented for joy. For legacy, for me. Echo barked once. I laughed. Even the dog agreed. Gloria sent one last message. We're moving. Just thought you'd want to know. I didn't. I deleted it. Didn't archive. Didn't analyze. Just gone. Chris said, closure. I shrugged. Irrelevance. That's the win. Not rage, not revenge, just disinterest. I used to rehearse conversations, now I forgot them mid-thought. Not because I forgave, but because I didn't fixate. The past lost its grip. I walked Echo through a park, smiling. Finally, my life didn't echo theirs. On the final page of my new journal, I wrote one line. I didn't just survive them, I outgrew them. Chris read it, nodded. Feels like the last line. I smiled. Of this chapter, yeah, the story wasn't over. But the part where they define me, done. Echo barked once, perfect timing. We laughed, then stepped outside. No courtrooms, no cameras. Just sidewalk and sky. Peace isn't passive, it's chosen. And every day, I choose it again. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.